LMC City Center Radio. It is episode 279, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. Did any big news happen nationally on Sunday after I recorded my podcast? I'm not sure. I haven't really been paying any attention. Yeah, obviously I'm being facetious. I recorded Monday's podcast, as usual, the day before on Sunday. And I did so before meeting up with my family for lunch, which, by the way, was at the Smoky Yolk, which used to be called Smoky Oak. They now serve breakfast all day, but still have lunch and dinner options that include barbecue, which they previously had when they were Smoky Oak. So just a quick plug for them. They're on James Island off of Camp Road. We all really enjoyed what we had. I had their quote-unquote breakfast nachos, which are not really nachos. They were, home fries that were covered, with things like salsa, guacamole, some brisket, I believe, was the meat that was added on it. Some cheese. That was really, really good, and everybody else in my family enjoyed it as well. Speaking of which, sadly, my brother's family did leave early on Monday. They are back home safe and sound, but already missed. But as I said, my parents are still here, so thankfully, Kitty and I aren't all by our lonesome after having lots of visitors. So it's nice tapered off, so we can, wean off having family here and, not have that hard cutoff going from, full house with lots of fun and laughter to just me and the cat. But in any event, got the podcast done, sat down, was enjoying lunch with my family on a nice hot Sunday afternoon, and the news broke. Yes, as you all are well aware, President Joe Biden officially announced that he will not be seeking re-election, which has set off a firestorm of speculation and rumor, as you all are well aware. But here we are on, as I'm recording this Tuesday, you're listening on Wednesday. It appears Vice President Kamala Harris is well on her way to being the official nominee. I mean, it's already been reported that she's got enough delegates secured. That won't become official until the Democratic National Convention. So there's always a chance something could change. Someone could throw their hat in the ring, which could lead to who knows what else. Delegates could change their mind. But at the moment, it seems like the Democratic Party is rallied behind Harris as the nominee. We will see what happens. But we're no longer talking about Biden versus Trump. It is now Harris versus Trump. What a wild, I don't know what, a month-ish. It's been a little over a month going from the debate where it was a disaster. I mean, let's be honest, they both were terrible. Trump and Biden were awful, just in different ways. Although the headlines were mostly about Biden, they both put on horrific performances, but Biden's was perceived and seemed to be a little worse because of, well, you all know, he just didn't seem to be fully there. He didn't sound good. Whether he was sick or whatnot, he kind of trailed off on an answer or two. He stumbled and mumbled, which we know happens with him, especially because he's had a stutter since he was a child and has fought through that, but roundly criticized in that debate. And then we have the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. And then this happens. So it's been wild. I venture to say it's got to be the craziest, lead up to an election we've seen, in this time frame anyway. We're late July. This has to be the most wild thing, series of events that have happened. And it's hard to keep up with it all. But that's where we're at. I'm not going to really dive into this at all. I mean, this is big national news. You're all very aware of it. I'm sure you're sick of hearing opinions and everything else, but obviously wanted to mention, like, hey, that's why maybe the biggest, well, I was about to say the biggest news in a while, but then again, there's the assassination attempt, of course, which was pretty big news. But that's why I didn't mention it in the last podcast, just because I had recorded it before it even happened. So here's me acknowledging it. So it's going to be a wild ride between here and the election in November. I'm sure there'll be more stories, and I'm sure I will have something to discuss about the race at some point in time. But for now, we're going to go and keep it right here in Charleston and talk about the latest local news. The drama surrounding the Sweetgrass Lounge continues. You may remember in the last show I talked about the tragedy that the family was going through, but also some of the, continuation of, whether it was lies or miscommunications or whatever you want to call it, or whatever it actually is. Who knows what, motivations are and things. But we talked about some of that continuing drama with the business that has had all sorts of issues that we've talked about over the last month or so. But in the second story, after I kind of detailed all the latest with that, I mentioned the situation involving another tragedy where two young women were killed in a hit and run on off of Morrison Drive, where two separate drivers hit them about a half hour apart. And that it was reported that both had been drinking in some capacity on that evening, and that the charges related to drunk driving resulting in death were going to move forward for both of the men involved. In that story, I had mentioned how one of those men, police say they knew that he had been drinking during a gig, and it was at the Sweetgrass Lounge, which, at the time was interesting just for the fact that, wow, this business came up again. But, that doesn't mean that they necessarily did anything wrong in that situation. We've talked a lot about rising insurance rates for, liability reasons for restaurants and bars that serve alcohol, how astronomical those rates are. And some businesses are unable to stay open, or have mentioned they may not be able to stay open because those rates are so high. And we've talked about, like, where exactly does liability lie with these situations. When does a business become liable for someone in their establishment drinking that decides to drive home? Where is that line? Who should be held responsible in these situations? How responsible? What percentage, for lack of a better term, should they be facing in these situations when it comes to lawsuits and things? And we've discussed all that, and so it's been a story here. So I didn't think too much of it at the time, but the Post and Courier realized, like, wait a minute, did they even have their liquor license at the time of this event where the person who ended up hitting the women, one of the people who ended up hitting the women on Morrison Drive, had been drinking in their establishment? Did they even have their liquor license at that time? So Post and Courier looked into it, and yes, there's a link in the show notes where you can get more details. But no, the business did not. So, as I mentioned, an investigator testified in court back on July 17th that Seth Carlson, who is 33 years old, allegedly drank several beverages at Sweetgrass Lounge, which was the home of Sweetgrass Vodka. And yes, that business did indeed lose its liquor license a month before the accident happened, which was in late April. So at some point in March, they had lost their liquor license, but they held a private event where they were serving alcohol. And during that event, Carlson was performing in a band that he is part of and was drinking on that night. Now, this is according to the investigators. And then also a couple bartenders that the Post and Courier reached out to and spoke to off the record about that evening. Now, for those who somehow are not up to date, maybe you're new to this podcast and haven't been paying attention to the news beforehand, but that business, Sweetgrass Vodka / Sweetgrass Lounge, they've been having all sorts of financial and legal troubles essentially since the beginning of this year. Specifically on March 5th, the State Department of Revenue sent a letter to Jared Swanger, who is the owner of Sweetgrass Vodka, saying that he hadn't filed his South Carolina personal income taxes in 2020, 2021, or 2022, and that he did not have liquor liability insurance coverage for the business, which, as I mentioned before, is required for any business that is serving alcohol. And in that same month, the state ended up denying the renewal of his liquor manufacturer license, along with permits to sell on-premises beer, wine, and liquor by the drink. So not only were we not, we have the taxes issue, of course, but they also didn't have the liquor liability insurance that they needed, which should make this whole situation potentially even more interesting as they move forward. But also they were denied the license they need to serve alcohol. So Swanger and his business need a liquor license, as I said, to sell and serve alcohol to patrons at the lounge, which was located at Meeting Street Road inside the refinery, which is a fairly new development on the Upper Peninsula. Now, because of all the troubles that this business was having. And again, you can look back, listen to old episodes or look back on old stories about this. But there were some assets inside the lounge and their bottling plant that they have on the premises, which included all their liquor that was on site at the time, had all been seized from the property on April 19th by a creditor who was owed $2.5 million. Post and Courier reached out to Swanger and his attorneys for comment. And as of this recording, they did not respond to questions about how this business was able to operate a private party at the lounge on April 28th with a bunch of things being seized, no liquor liability insurance, and no liquor license, no ability to serve alcohol of any kind. Post and Courier did find out some details. Staff at Alchemist Wine and Spirits, which is in the 6 Mile area of Mount Pleasant, said that liquor was bought from them wholesale before the private party and was charged to the Sweetgrass account. So, yeah, all their liquor was seized, so they had to go somewhere else to get some, and that's apparently where the alcohol came from, but still doesn't explain how. And it would seem it's not so much how did they serve liquor when they're not supposed to. It just seems they knew they weren't supposed to and just did it anyway. So certainly a few aspects here. It just adds to the whole drama and problems that is going on with the Sweetgrass Vodka brand and the lounge. It also now is tied into this tragedy involving a hit and run, which if they didn't have liquor liability insurance, if they are brought into the suit, which sometimes, as we've seen, several businesses in town have been brought into lawsuits that involve DUIs, whether it's resulted in death, like that horrible situation on Folly Beach involving the bride who died just hours after her wedding, or the situation where a drunk driver hit one of the rickshaws that you see downtown and severely injured the rickshaw driver. So usually it's when there's injury or death involved that these businesses are brought into a lawsuit involving drunk driving. So if they're brought into that, if they don't have that liability, that means now Swanger and the business, they're going to owe it themselves if they are found guilty or if they are brought into a lawsuit, which hasn't happened yet. But just based on what we've seen from local lawyers in these situations, I would be shocked if they aren't brought into a lawsuit. So it just adds so many more, tentacles to this story. It's now part of this hit and run story. And again, we can debate about where liability lies in these situations with businesses, but it won't change the fact that this business is now involved in that. So it just keeps getting worse and worse for Swanger, his family, and his business. And as I said, has added another wrinkle to this horrible hit and run situation that happened as well. Whatever details and updates happen, I will be sure to pass them along to you as they come out. Let's entirely switch gears and let's talk about something kind of fun and silly. And that is a new event that is coming to the Charleston area, specifically on Saturday, September 21st. We, and by we, I mean residents or, hey, visitors who happen to be in town as well, of course, can enjoy a new event called Pickle Palooza, which will be a local celebration of all things pickle. It'll be happening at the Embassy Suites in Mount Pleasant. It's just across the bridge, the Ravenel Bridge, for those who don't know where that hotel is. So it'll be held in that property. So what can you expect? It's going to be a festival style event that'll have live music from bands and DJs. So there'll be several performers throughout the event. There's going to be food trucks, beer tents, liquor vendors, pickle ball. So they're, going not just pickle the food, but also anything with pickle in the name. So there will be pickleball games and much more. And I'll tell you some of the more kind of interesting things they're going to have. But tickets are on sale for this event now. As I said, it'll be held on a Saturday in September, the 21st. So if you're interested, you can visit the link in the show notes, which will then lead you to where you can purchase tickets and get some more information about the event. As far as pickleball is concerned, there will be courts on site so people can play. There will also be coaches and experienced players who will be able to answer questions about the game, give tips, tricks, things like that. So if you've always been kind of curious about it, but didn't really know where you can learn more, you didn't want to go visit like one of the pickleball venues that have opened, this would be a good chance to just learn more about the game and see if it's something you'd be interested in. Outside of that, as far as treats and activities that are related to the food pickles. There's going to be tasting flights, a pickle eating contest, a pickle juice chug challenge. The food trucks that I mentioned, in addition to whatever other fare they have, they will be having pickle infused dishes as well. It's expected that things like pickle pizza might be on the menu or pickle ice cream. There will also be a pickle toss, merchandise, photo ops, pickle flavored beverages, pickle pops. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on. How many times can I say pickle in one episode? So they've even listed pickle dancers and pickle gladiators. I have no idea what that means, but it is something that is listed as being part of the event. So as I said, just something kind of silly and fun, and it seems like it's getting some traction. I'm seeing people commenting it online. I mean, lots of people love pickles, so that's no surprise. And it looks like it'll be a fun event, and I hope to attend. It is a family-friendly event, so if you were wondering that, you can bring children, and also children 8 and under are actually admitted free of charge. Obviously, they have to be accompanied by a parent or guardian. So if you have any kids that are 8 or under, they get in for free. Anybody that is 9 years old, 9 years old, 9 years old or older. Stumbling. You thought I was going to stumble over pickles, but I didn't. It's this part. Obviously, there is admission fee now. The price varies because number one, there's two ticket options. There's a VIP option, which includes a sectioned off area that will also have, those folks will have access to an all inclusive bar. There's general admission tickets, but also those ticket prices vary depending on when you purchase them. So they're cheaper the earlier you buy them than after a certain amount sell, or after a certain date, the prices do go up. So if you're interested, you're going to want to get tickets sooner rather than later. So it should be a lot of fun. Again, Pickle Palooza, September 21st in Mount Pleasant. The link is in the show notes if you want some more information. And that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you are having a great week and staying cool out there. I'll be back with you on Friday. Thank you for listening, and a big thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And also a gigantic thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. I look forward to being in your ears on Friday. That sounded weird, and I didn't mean it to, but we're going to leave it in. But until Friday, good night and good luck.